So the company, for its first 150 years, is just the trading company, and because the Mughals are not particularly interested, for some reason, in exporting their goods, the company steps in and acts as the shipping agent, in other words, for the Mughals, and does very well. It beats local competition. They have better ships, and they sail this stuff around the world. And then things change gear in the 1750s, and two things have happened that change the nature of everything. The first thing that happens is that the Mughal Empire has disintegrated. It reaches its peak under Aurangzeb, who dies in 1707. And shortly after that, the Persian emperor Nadir Shah comes down from Persia, he invades Afghanistan, and he defeats the Mughals at the Battle of Karnal and captures the Mughal emperor Muhammad Shah Rangila, marches him into Delhi, and 6 weeks later he leaves with 8,000 wagons filled with Mughal jewels, gold, and silver. Everything the Mughals have looted from everywhere else in the region just gets taken off in a single looting expedition back to modern Afghanistan, to Herat. And they take the Peacock Throne, in which is embedded the Koh-i-Noor. They take the Darya-Noor, the great Mughal diamond, which is now in the Kremlin as the in the scepter of Catherine the Great. All this stuff just debouches off to the Hindu Kush, and for an art historian, this is one of the most wonderful periods of Indian culture, because all these little kingdoms are trying to show their style and their power by commissioning artists to paint gilded palaces and commission amazing dancers and commission amazing literary work. So for literature, for painting, for music, for Indian dance, this is one of the most dramatically prolific and culturally fascinating periods of Indian history. But politically, it means that the Mughal Empire, which was this unstoppable force of 4 million men under arms, has now fragmented into lots of little kingdoms. And not just the British or rather English East India Company, but the French Compagnie des Indes, between the two of them, begin hoovering up these little tiny states, which are culturally very rich, which are economically very rich, but which are militarily and politically vulnerable. And the French show the way. In 1740, they are the first to train up sepoys, local Indian soldiers, in the latest military technology from Europe. Europe has just fought two big wars, the War of the Austrian Succession and the War of the Spanish Succession. And Frederick the Great of Prussia, who's a military genius, has transformed warfare. Quite simple little changes to the nature of cannon. He puts an elevating screw on the back of a cannon. He makes them portable so horses can move them around battlefields. A form of musket that has a bayonet and which can be rapidly loaded and fired in file firing. So one line, kneel down and fire, the next lot load, then that lot. So you get continual firing by infantry. These techniques, none of which are rocket science, all of which are quite easily copied, get brought to India by the French, and they train up local guys to do it, and it's incredibly effective. The first time it's tried out is in 1740 at a battle called the Adyar River, which is now southern Madras and southern Chennai, and 70 French company sepoys see off 3,000 Carnatic cavalry of the Mughals. And from that point, for about 30 years, the English and the French realized they can more or less see off any army with this new military technology. And the English company tries this out, first of all, in Bengal with Siraj-ud-Dowlah, the Battle of Plassey, then again defeats an alliance of the Nawab of Bengal, the Nawab of Awadh, which is sort of central where Lucknow is now, UP, and the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam at the Battle of Buxar, 1764. And to everyone's amazement, most of all to the company's amazement, who haven't planned this particularly, they found that using this new military technology, they're in a position to just take over North India, this incredibly rich, this incredibly civilized, but now vulnerably fractured and disunited kingdom, is simply conquered in as little as 50 years by these guys. And how they do it is astonishingly audacious. They train up local Indian warriors, normally Rajputs and Brahmins, to use this new technology. And the company's sepoys grow from 20,000 at the time of Clive to 50,000 by the time of the Battle of Buxar to, by 1799, only 40 years later, 200,000 sepoys, which is literally double the size of the British Army. The British Army, which is barely involved in India at this point, is only 100,000 men and is now engaged in the struggle with Napoleon. But the company, which never, in London, 100 years into its history, the company only has 35 people in its head office. And in Bengal, never has, even at its peak, more than 2,000 white guys, 2,000 Goras, sitting in Bengal. They train up 200,000 Indians to fight other Indians, and they borrow the money from Marwari and Hindu bankers. If you wrote this as a novel or a film script, you'd be laughed out of court because it's the most improbable story. Why would these guys fight their own brothers and sisters? Why would anyone lend money to a voracious corporation that was involved in something so violent? And the biggest challenge for us today understanding this period is to try and work out why it was that, well, that the soldiers were willing to be paid. The answer is they got paid twice the salary of any other military unit in the country. And why the Marwari traders and the Hindu bankers of Benares and Allahabad and Patna would lend money to the company. And the answer is, in that case, that the company may have been foreign in terms of it was Christian, meat-eating, white-skinned, from Europe. But as far as the Marwaris were concerned, as far as the moneylenders were concerned, they understood that they were both financiers. They spoke the same financial language. They understood about repaying loans on time with interest. They had civil courts where business contracts could be defended in court and upheld. They had... Well, Calcutta initially was like Dubai or Singapore today. It was a tax haven where you could escape tax, you had to pay elsewhere, and where you could grow and cultivate fortunes, which is what the Marwaris were doing there. The Marwaris obviously were from Marwar, from Jodhpur. And they went to Calcutta for the same reason as people go to Dubai and Singapore today, and they didn't have to pay tax. As simple as that. And the company is quite ingenious in realizing that and playing on that. So the next thing it does in the 1790s is it begins to break up the old Mughal estates, which are huge areas of land, and it puts it up for auction. Who buys this stuff? The new rising Hindu middle class. Families like the Tagores, the Debs, the Maliks. And by buying into this world, they become part of it. They get subsumed into this company world. And they make the decision, rightly or wrongly, however you judge them, that the company, which may loot, asset strip, plunder, and be incredibly violent to its enemies, is, for them, the least worst option financially, that their money is safe with it, their capital is safe with it, and that they prefer it to the Mughals or to the Marathas. The Marathas, incidentally, raided Bengal in the 1740s, looted, raped, and pillaged, so they're not going to go with those guys. They're still called the Baghis in Bengal, and people remember them as these like the Vikings, I suppose, are remembered in Britain. So they make this decision, and Bengal, as this industrial hub, has the resources. I mean, it's a horrifying story from a variety of fronts. It's a story of, I mean, think Avatar. That's the same sort of story. It turned into a fable today. That movie where the mining company goes and takes over a planet. But it's like that. It's a very canny, ruthless corporation that manages by military force and by financial inducement.
How has contemporary India reacted to this statement by yourself?
So the Mawaris would not have seen themselves as funding the expansion. The first thing they did was that the Jagat set actually pays Clive to topple Siraj-ud-Dowlah. It's a palace coup that they're paying them for. And they don't calculate on the company then being the puppet masters. But the Hindu bankers, particularly the big Benares bankers, continue to fund the company because they see it as the safest place for their capital. It's that simple. They're businessmen. They have to make a judgment on which is the most profitable, who is going to repay them their loans, and the answer is the company will.
So pure business.
It's pure business. They see it as they do today. And it's that simple. And the company, ultimately, its initial success is due to military superiority. Its final success is due to two things. One, the fact it has Bengal with all its revenues. And secondly, the bankers back it rather than the Marathas. It's that simple.